There are forms of abuse that leave bruises. And there are forms of abuse that leave something much harder to explain. A person who still looks perfectly fine on the outside, while feeling as though something inside them is slowly dying. Their confidence is disappearing. Their ability to trust themselves is disappearing. Their joy is disappearing. Their ability to speak freely, sleep peacefully, make decisions, and believe their own memories is disappearing. And when you have experienced this kind of relationship, you may eventually find yourself asking a terrifying question. How did I become a stranger to myself? That is why the phrase, "the hidden ways covert narcissists try to kill you," needs to be understood carefully. We are not going to turn this into a fantasy that every narcissistic person secretly wants you physically dead. That would be irresponsible and psychologically inaccurate. We are talking about something more subtle and, in many relationships, much more recognizable. The ways manipulative behavior can slowly attack your emotional safety, your identity, your confidence, your relationships, your boundaries, and your sense of reality. And in rare situations where there are actual threats of physical harm, stalking, poisoning, violence, or other dangerous behavior, that is not something to rationalize as merely narcissistic behavior. That is a safety issue that deserves immediate practical action. But today, I want you to understand something that may change the way you look at your entire experience. Sometimes, the person who is trying to control you does not need to destroy your body to profoundly damage your life. They may try to make you doubt yourself. They may make you feel guilty for having needs. They may punish you for speaking honestly. They may convince you that your boundaries are cruelty. They may slowly separate you from the people who love you. They may create so much confusion that you begin spending every waking hour trying to understand what you did wrong. And eventually, you stop living. You start managing. You manage their moods. You manage their reactions. You manage their expectations. You manage their anger. You manage their disappointment. You manage their silence. You manage their image. You manage the household atmosphere. You manage what you say, how you say it, when you say it, and whether you should say anything at all. And that is where the healing journey has to begin. You have to ask yourself, when did my life become an emotional surveillance system built around another person's reactions? Because you deserve a life in which you are allowed to breathe. You deserve a life in which peace does not have to be earned. You deserve relationships where honesty does not automatically become punishment. And most importantly, you deserve to become familiar with yourself again. One of the most confusing things about covert narcissistic behavior is that it may not look like abuse from the outside. There may be no screaming in public. There may be no obvious intimidation. There may be no dramatic scenes that everyone can see. Instead, there can be small moments that accumulate. A sarcastic comment, a dismissive response, a strange accusation, a sudden withdrawal of affection, a compliment that contains an insult, a private criticism followed by public charm. A conversation where you clearly remember what happened, only to be told that you imagined it. You begin to wonder, am I too sensitive? That question is important because healthy self-reflection and manipulated self-doubt are not the same thing. Healthy self-reflection says, maybe I handled that poorly. What can I learn? Manipulated self-doubt says, maybe everything is my fault. Maybe I cannot trust my perception. Maybe I should stop speaking altogether. The first leads to growth. The second can lead to self-erasure. Gaslighting is one of the most powerful mechanisms that can produce this self-erasure. It does not always look like someone dramatically shouting, "That never happened." Sometimes it is much quieter. You remember a promise, they deny making it. You remember an insult. They tell you it was a joke. You describe a repeated pattern. They focus on one tiny detail and use that detail to dismiss the entire experience. You explain how something affected you. Suddenly, the conversation becomes about your tone. You say, "You hurt me." They say, "Look how aggressive you are." You say, "I need a boundary." They say, "You are controlling me." You say, "I need space." They say, "You are abandoning me." And eventually, you stop talking about their behavior because every conversation becomes a courtroom where you are forced to defend your right to have feelings. Listen carefully. You do not have to prove that your pain is legitimate to the person who caused it. You can learn from your mistakes without accepting false accusations. You can acknowledge your imperfections without accepting someone else's distorted version of reality. You can say, "I could have handled that better," without saying, "Therefore, everything you did was acceptable." That distinction can save you. Because one of the hidden ways emotional abuse can kill your spirit is by turning every disagreement into an examination of your character. Instead of discussing what happened, you are forced to defend who you are. Suddenly, you are selfish. You are ungrateful. You are too emotional. You are impossible. You are cold. You are dramatic. You are difficult. You are the problem. And because you are a person who cares, you begin investigating yourself. Maybe I am selfish. Maybe I am too emotional. Maybe I expect too much. Maybe I should be more patient. Maybe I should forgive again. Maybe if I explain myself differently, they will finally understand. Maybe if I love them harder, they will become kinder. And this is where empathy can become a trap. Your empathy is not the problem. Your willingness to understand is not the problem. Your compassion is not the problem. The problem is when compassion becomes permission for someone to repeatedly violate your boundaries. There is a difference between understanding why someone behaves badly and allowing that behavior to continue harming you. You can understand someone's wounds and still walk away. You can recognize someone's insecurity and still say no. You can have compassion for someone's childhood and still refuse to become their emotional punching bag. You can believe that someone has pain without volunteering to be the place where they discharge it. That is maturity. That is emotional strength. And sometimes the person who has benefited from your endless understanding will not like your new boundaries. This is where things often become especially revealing, because a boundary does not merely tell another person what you will accept. A boundary reveals what they expected you to tolerate. When you say, "I will not stay in a conversation where I am being insulted," a healthy person may disagree with you, but they can understand the limit. A controlling person may say, "So now you think you're better than me?" You say, "If you yell at me, I will end the conversation." They say, "You're threatening me." You say, "I need privacy." They say, "What are you hiding?" You say, "I am not comfortable discussing that." They say, "You don't love me." Suddenly, your basic autonomy becomes evidence of betrayal. And this is one of the hidden dangers of covert manipulation. You can be trained to experience normal independence as guilt. You begin apologizing for having needs. You apologize for resting. You apologize for spending time with friends. You apologize for wanting privacy. You apologize for not responding immediately. You apologize for disagreeing. You apologize for saying no. You apologize for being tired. You apologize for being yourself. And one day you realize something devastating. You have become an apologetic version of yourself. You are not expressing yourself anymore. You are negotiating your existence. That is why healing is not simply about getting away from a manipulative person. Healing is also about returning to the parts of yourself you abandoned in order to survive the relationship. Maybe you stopped listening to your intuition. Maybe you stopped dressing the way you liked. Maybe you stopped talking to certain friends. Maybe you stopped pursuing your goals. Maybe you stopped making decisions without asking for approval. Maybe you became afraid of making the wrong choice because every mistake was used against you. Maybe you stopped dreaming because dreaming required energy, and all your energy was being spent maintaining emotional stability. This is why someone can technically leave a relationship and still feel trapped inside it. The person is gone, but their voice remains. You're selfish. You're going to regret this. No one else will love you. You can't make it without me. You'll come crawling back. You're the problem. You'll never find anyone better. Those statements can become internal recordings, and the work of healing is learning to recognize. That voice is not necessarily my truth. You may have internalized somebody else's judgment so deeply that you mistake it for your own thinking. So begin asking yourself a different question. What do I believe when I am not afraid of someone's reaction? That question can open a door, because fear has a way of making your world very small. When you are constantly anticipating someone's response, your brain becomes focused on prediction rather than possibility. Instead of asking, "What do I want?" you ask, "What will happen if I want this?" Instead of asking, "What do I believe?" you ask, "Will they get angry if I say it?" Instead of asking, "Where do I want to go?" you ask, "Will they approve?" This is not freedom. This is emotional captivity. And you may not recognize it because captivity does not always have physical walls. Sometimes the wall is guilt. Sometimes the wall is fear. Sometimes the wall is confusion. Sometimes the wall is the belief that you are responsible for keeping another adult emotionally stable. You are not. You are responsible for your choices. You are responsible for your boundaries. You are responsible for your healing. But you are not responsible for regulating another person's entire emotional world. Let that sink in. You are not required to sacrifice your peace, so someone else never has to feel disappointed. You are not required to destroy yourself to prove that you love someone. Love without boundaries can become self-abandonment. And self-abandonment is not the same thing as kindness. Another hidden tactic can involve isolation. Sometimes it is obvious. Don't talk to that person. Your family is toxic. Your friends don't understand us. Why do you need them when you have me? But sometimes isolation is more sophisticated. They may repeatedly create conflicts whenever you spend time with others. They may become cold when you make independent plans. They may accuse your friends of secretly wanting your relationship to fail. They may create such intense emotional drama that you eventually stop accepting invitations because it is easier to stay home than deal with the aftermath. And notice what happens. They did not have to physically lock you away. They simply made connection expensive. That is a powerful form of control. You begin thinking, it's not worth the argument. So you stay home. Then another invitation comes. Again, it's not worth the argument. You decline. Months later, you look around and realize that your world has become incredibly small. This is why supportive relationships matter so much during healing. Not because every friend or family member will understand perfectly, but because healthy connection gives you multiple mirrors. When you are isolated, one person's interpretation of you can begin to feel like objective reality. You need other perspectives. You need people who remember who you were. You need people who can say, you were not always this afraid. You need people who can remind you, you used to laugh. You need people who can tell you, you don't have to explain yourself to me. And sometimes the most healing sentence in the world is simply, I believe you. Not because every memory is automatically perfect, but because you deserve relationships where your experience can be explored without immediate dismissal. Another hidden form of destruction is financial or practical dependence. A manipulative person may gradually encourage you to give up independence. Maybe they handle everything. Maybe they discourage your career. Maybe they tell you that your ambitions are unrealistic. Maybe they convince you that you could never survive without them. And over time, dependence becomes a psychological weapon. The message becomes, you need me. But sometimes the truth is the opposite. You were trained to believe you needed them. There is an enormous difference. When you rebuild practical independence, you are not necessarily being cruel. You are creating options create psychological safety. The ability to make your own decisions matters. Having access to your own resources matters. Maintaining relationships outside the relationship matters. Knowing where important documents are matters. Knowing what your financial situation is matters. Having somewhere safe to go matters. These are not acts of revenge. They are acts of self-respect. And if you are ever dealing with genuine threats, stalking, violence, or suspicious attempts to physically harm you, do not reduce that to a personality label. Take concrete safety measures, involve trusted people, preserve relevant evidence, and seek appropriate professional or emergency assistance in your area. You do not need to diagnose someone before taking danger seriously. Now, let's talk about something that can feel almost impossible to accept. The person who hurt you may never give you the closure you want. You may be waiting for the day they finally say, "I understand what I did." You may imagine them sitting alone, realizing everything they lost. You may want one honest conversation where they acknowledge the manipulation, apologize sincerely, and finally understand the pain they caused. And maybe that conversation will happen. But your healing cannot depend on it. Because if your peace requires another person to develop insight, you have handed them control over your recovery. Closure sometimes comes from information, but often closure comes from acceptance. I may never understand why they did all of this. I may never receive the apology I deserved. I may never get the confession. I may never convince them that my experience was real, but I can still choose what happens next. That is closure, not because the past suddenly became acceptable, but because the past no longer gets to determine your future. This is why no contact can be powerful when it is appropriate and safe. No contact is not a punishment. It is not a psychological trick designed to make someone chase you. It is not a strategy for making a narcissistic person suffer. No contact is about reducing access to a dynamic that keeps reopening the wound. And if complete no contact is impossible because of children, work, finances, or other obligations, low contact and structured communication can sometimes serve a similar protective purpose. Keep conversations focused. Keep boundaries clear. Do not explain every emotion. Do not argue every accusation. Do not turn every message into a referendum on your character. You do not have to attend every argument you are invited to. That sentence alone can change your life. Because manipulative dynamics often survive through endless engagement. They provoke, you explain, they reinterpret, you defend, they accuse, you clarify. They change the subject. You chase the original issue. They bring up 5 years ago. You respond. And suddenly, 3 hours have passed. What did you accomplish? You became exhausted. That is why emotional detachment matters. Emotional detachment does not mean becoming heartless. It means learning that another person's emotional reaction does not automatically require your intervention. They can be angry. You can remain calm. They can misunderstand. You can remain grounded. They can accuse. You can choose not to defend yourself endlessly. They can dislike your boundary. You can keep it. This is emotional freedom. And perhaps the most difficult part is that your nervous system may not immediately believe you are safe. You may know intellectually that you have left, but emotionally you are still waiting for the next explosion. You may hear a notification and feel your stomach tighten. You may see their name and suddenly lose your peace. You may rehearse conversations before having them. You may imagine every possible response. That does not mean you are weak. It may mean your mind learned to anticipate instability. Healing takes time. Your body and mind may need repeated experiences of safety before they stop expecting danger. So do not shame yourself for healing slowly. You are not behind. You are rebuilding. And rebuilding is not glamorous. Some days you will feel powerful. Other days you will miss them. Some days you will know exactly why you left. Other days you will remember the good moments and wonder whether you made a mistake. That does not necessarily mean you should go back. It means you are human. People do not only grieve bad relationships, they grieve the future they imagined. They grieve the version of the person they hoped would appear. They grieve birthdays that could have been different, holidays that could have been peaceful, conversations that never happened, promises that were never fulfilled. They grieve the relationship they kept trying to create. And grief can make you romanticize the past. So when nostalgia arrives, do not ask only, "What did I miss?" Ask, "What did it cost me?" What did it cost your confidence? What did it cost your sleep? What did it cost your friendships? What did it cost your creativity? What did it cost your ability to trust yourself? What did it cost your peace? Because the mind can remember a beautiful afternoon and forget 6 months of emotional instability. You need the whole picture, not to stay angry, not to stay obsessed, but to stay clear. Clarity is not hatred. Clarity is remembering reality without needing to exaggerate it. You do not need to say, "They were evil." You can say, "That relationship was unhealthy for me." You do not need to say, "They destroyed everything." You can say, "I became someone I did not recognize while I was there." You do not need revenge. You need restoration. And restoration begins when you stop making their behavior the center of your emotional universe. This is one of the biggest shifts in healing. At first, everything is about them. Why did they do it? Will they regret it? Are they thinking about me? Will they contact me? Are they happy? Are they suffering? Did they replace me? Will they ever apologize? And eventually, if you keep healing, the questions change. What do I want? What do I believe? What do I enjoy? What boundaries do I need? What kind of people do I want around me? What kind of life do I want to build? What did I learn? What will I never tolerate again? That is, when your life begins returning to you, the goal is not to spend the next 10 years studying the person who hurt you. The goal is to understand enough to stop repeating the pattern, learn the pattern, then build your life. because there is a danger in becoming so fascinated with narcissistic psychology that the narcissist remains psychologically present long after the relationship has ended. You can become addicted to analyzing them. Every post is about them. Every video is about them. Every conversation is about them. Every dream is about them. Every new person is compared to them. You left physically, but mentally, you are still living in their house. At some point, healing requires a new question. What would my life look like if I stopped organizing it around what happened to me? That question is not about forgetting, it is about expanding. Your trauma may be part of your story. It does not have to become the title of your entire life. You are more than what someone did to you. You are more than the relationship you survived. You are more than the diagnosis you assigned someone. You are more than the years you lost. You are the person who is still here, and that matters. Maybe you think you are too damaged to start again. Maybe you think you wasted too much time. Maybe you think your best years are gone. Maybe you are older now. Maybe you have children. Maybe your career changed. Maybe your finances changed. Maybe your confidence is not what it used to be. But listen to me. A damaged chapter is not a destroyed book. You can write another chapter. And it does not have to begin with some dramatic transformation. It can begin with one boundary, one honest conversation, one walk, one journal entry. One phone call to a trusted person, one night of sleep, one decision not to respond, one decision to stop explaining, one decision to believe your own experience enough to take care of yourself. Healing often happens through small acts of self-loyalty. You keep the promise you make to yourself. You say no when you mean no. You rest when you are tired. You leave when someone repeatedly crosses the line. You stop chasing people who repeatedly withdraw. You stop begging for basic respect. You stop trying to convince someone to value what they have already shown they do not value. And little by little, something returns. Self-trust. At first, it is tiny. You make a decision. You keep it. You survive the discomfort. You realize that the world did not end. You set another boundary. Someone gets angry. You survive that too. You say no. You feel guilty. You do not reverse the decision. Eventually, your nervous system learns. I can disappoint someone and still be safe. I can say no and still be a good person. I can walk away and still be loving. I can protect myself without becoming cruel. That is freedom. And perhaps one of the most important things you will learn is that boundaries are not walls designed to punish people. They are instructions for how you participate in relationships. A boundary says, "This is what I will do." Not, "You must become a completely different person." You cannot control whether someone lies. You can control whether you continue engaging after repeated dishonesty. You cannot control whether someone insults you. You can control whether you remain in the conversation. You cannot control whether someone manipulates. You can control how much access they have to you. You cannot control whether someone understands your pain. You can control whether you continue handing them your most vulnerable parts. That is the shift from control to responsibility. Stop asking, how do I make them behave? Start asking, what will I do if they don't? That question gives your power back. Because you cannot build your healing around someone else's transformation. You build it around your own decisions. And if you are still in contact with this person, remember that you do not need to announce every boundary. Sometimes quiet consistency is stronger than dramatic declaration. You do not need a final speech. You do not need to explain every reason. You do not need to convince them that you are leaving for the right reasons. Sometimes the most powerful sentence is simply, "This does not work for me anymore." And then your behavior matches your words. That is integrity. Now, perhaps you are wondering why someone who seemed so loving could become so destructive. This is where we have to be careful. Human behavior is complicated. Not every inconsistent person is narcissistic. Not every emotionally distant person has narcissistic personality disorder. Not every selfish behavior means a person has a clinical disorder. But some people do display persistent patterns of entitlement, manipulation, lack of empathy, exploitation, grandiosity, or extreme sensitivity to criticism. And regardless of the label, the impact on you matters. You do not need a diagnosis to recognize that a relationship is harming you. That may be one of the most liberating ideas you ever accept. You do not need to prove that someone is a narcissist. You need to determine whether the relationship is safe, respectful, and healthy enough for you. Labels can help organize information, but boundaries are based on behavior. If someone repeatedly lies, you respond to the lying. If someone repeatedly humiliates you, you respond to the humiliation. If someone violates your privacy, you respond to the violation. If someone threatens you, you respond to the threat. You do not need to win an argument about their personality. You need to protect your life. And there is another hidden form of harm that deserves attention. The way chronic emotional stress can consume your attention. You may become constantly vigilant. What mood are they in? What did that look mean? Why did they take so long to respond? Why did they suddenly become affectionate? Why did they withdraw? Did I say something? Are they angry? Are they cheating? Are they planning something? Will they punish me? That constant monitoring is exhausting. You become a detective in your own home, and no human being should have to live indefinitely in detective mode. Eventually, you have to realize that peace cannot be created by gathering enough evidence to predict every unpredictable behavior. Sometimes peace comes from deciding what you will do regardless of what they do. If they become angry, I will leave the conversation. If they insult me, I will disengage. If they violate the agreement, I will take the appropriate next step. If they manipulate me, I will not debate my reality for hours. If they threaten me, I will prioritize safety. If they try to pull me back into chaos, I will remember why I chose peace. That is preparation without obsession. And if you find yourself struggling to make these changes alone, seeking a qualified therapist or counselor can be a powerful act of strength. You do not have to carry years of confusion by yourself. The right professional can help you understand patterns, rebuild boundaries, process grief, and distinguish between genuine accountability and the guilt that manipulation may have taught you to carry. You deserve support, not because you are weak, because recovery is easier when you do not have to do everything alone. And now I want to speak directly to the person who has spent years believing that if they had just been better, the relationship would have worked. Maybe you were more patient. Maybe you communicated. Maybe you apologized. Maybe you went to counseling. Maybe you changed your behavior. Maybe you sacrificed your dreams. Maybe you gave chance after chance. Maybe you became the person you thought they needed. And still, something remained wrong. Please understand this. A relationship cannot be healed by one person's self-abandonment. You cannot love another person into accountability. You cannot communicate someone into empathy. You cannot sacrifice enough to create mutuality where there is none. And you cannot become smaller enough to make another person's insecurity disappear. At some point, love has to include love for yourself. That does not mean selfishness. It means you stop treating your own suffering as the price of maintaining a relationship. You matter too. Your sleep matters. Your dignity matters. Your mental peace matters. Your future matters. Your children, if you have them, deserve to see you model healthy boundaries. Your younger self deserves to see you protect the person you have become. And the future version of you is depending on today's version of you to make a different choice. So make the choice, not the perfect choice, the honest choice. Maybe your choice is to leave. Maybe your choice is to create distance. Maybe your choice is to seek legal or professional guidance. Maybe your choice is to stop engaging in certain arguments. Maybe your choice is to rebuild your support network. Maybe your choice is simply to admit to yourself, "This is hurting me." You do not have to know the entire road before taking the first step. Sometimes clarity comes after movement. And if you are afraid of being alone, remember this. Loneliness and peace are not the same thing, and company and connection are not the same thing. You can be surrounded by someone and feel profoundly alone. You can sleep next to someone and feel emotionally abandoned. You can have a relationship and still have no safety. So do not measure the quality of your life only by whether someone is present. Measure it by what their presence creates. Do you feel safe? Can you be honest? Can you make mistakes? Can you disagree? Can you rest? Can you have friendships? Can you have privacy? Can you pursue goals? Can you say no? Can you be yourself? These questions matter because a relationship should not require you to disappear in order to survive it. And now, perhaps the greatest lesson of all, the person who tried to make you doubt yourself does not get to define you. The person who called you difficult does not get to decide your worth. The person who rejected you does not get to determine whether you are lovable. The person who manipulated you does not get to write your future. The person who misunderstood you does not get to become the final authority on who you are. You get to decide, and you may need to decide again and again. Some mornings you will wake up strong. Some mornings you will wake up grieving. Some days you will feel free. Some days you will miss what you thought you had. Keep going. Healing is not proven by never thinking about the past. Healing is proven by what you do when the past comes to mind. You remember, you breathe. You refuse to romanticize what harmed you. You refuse to punish yourself. You return to the present. You choose yourself again and again and again. Eventually, the person who once occupied every corner of your mind becomes a smaller and smaller part of your story. Not because you defeated them, because you outgrew the need to keep fighting them. That is the kind of victory nobody can take from you. You no longer need them to understand. You no longer need them to regret. You no longer need them to suffer. You no longer need them to admit that you were right. You simply need to live. Live fully. Live honestly. Live peacefully. Build friendships. Evacuate something. Travel if you can. Law again. Learn something new. Take care of your body. Protect your sleep. Ride. Pray if prayer is meaningful to you. Spend time with people who make you feel emotionally safe. Return to the hobbies you abandoned. Make plans that have nothing to do with them. Let your life become larger than the relationship that once consumed it. Because the final stage of healing is not endless analysis. It is expansion. Your world gets bigger. Your identity gets bigger. Your future gets bigger. And the relationship that once felt like the entire universe becomes one chapter, a painful chapter, a formative chapter. Perhaps even a chapter that taught you lessons you never wanted to learn, but still a chapter, not the entire book. So when you hear the phrase, "they tried to kill you," remember what we are really talking about. Sometimes psychological abuse can make you feel as though your confidence is dying, your joy is dying, your identity is dying, your voice is dying, your hope is dying. But what has been damaged can be rebuilt. What has been silenced can speak again. What has been neglected can be cared for. What has been abandoned can be reclaimed. And you do not have to become the person you were before the relationship. Maybe you are going to become someone wiser, someone more discerning, someone who understands that compassion needs boundaries. Someone who knows that love without respect is not enough. Someone who recognizes manipulation sooner. Someone who no longer confuses intensity with intimacy. Someone who no longer mistakes being needed for being loved. Someone who no longer thinks that suffering proves devotion. Someone who can say, "I love you, but I will not abandon myself for you." That person is not cold. That person is healed enough to have boundaries, and there is something else you need to know. You do not have to hate the person who hurt you in order to leave them. Sometimes hatred keeps you connected. You are still emotionally responding, still checking, still wondering, still proving, still fighting. Freedom is quieter. Freedom says, I no longer need to carry you. Not because what happened did not matter, because it mattered enough for you to stop sacrificing yourself. So release the need for revenge. Release the fantasy that one day they will finally understand everything. Release the desire to make them feel exactly what you felt. Let life take care of what you cannot control. Your responsibility is different. Your responsibility is to heal. Your responsibility is to protect yourself. Your responsibility is to learn. Your responsibility is to become emotionally honest. Your responsibility is to build relationships where respect goes both ways. Your responsibility is to stop betraying yourself just because someone else might be disappointed. And if you ever find yourself tempted to return simply because you miss them, remember that missing someone is not always evidence that you belong with them. Sometimes you miss familiarity. Sometimes you miss the good moments. Sometimes you miss the potential. Sometimes you miss the person you hoped they would become. Sometimes you miss who you were before everything became complicated. Missing them does not erase what happened. You can miss someone and still leave. You can love someone and still choose distance. You can forgive someone and still never give them the same access again. Forgiveness, if you choose it, does not require reconciliation. Compassion does not require proximity. Understanding does not require permission. And love does not require self-destruction. That is the message I want you to carry with you. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to leave unhealthy dynamics. You are allowed to stop explaining. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to have standards. You are allowed to want consistency. You are allowed to expect respect. You are allowed to become difficult to manipulate. And becoming difficult to manipulate does not mean becoming difficult to love. It means becoming honest about what love should look like. Real love does not require you to constantly prove your innocence. Real love does not punish you for having boundaries. Real love does not demand that you abandon your support system. Real love does not make you afraid to speak. Real love can tolerate your individuality. Real love can survive disagreement. Real love does not need you to disappear. So let the healing begin, not tomorrow, not when they apologize, not when they finally understand, not when you stop remembering. Begin now. Begin with one small promise to yourself. I will listen to myself. Then keep that promise. Tomorrow, make another. I will not chase someone who repeatedly withdraws. Keep it. Then another. I will not explain my humanity to someone committed to misunderstanding it. Keep it. Then another. I will not confuse guilt with responsibility. Keep it. Then another. I will build a life that does not depend on someone else's approval. Keep it. These small promises become a new identity, and one day you will look back and realize that the person you were so afraid to lose was never the only person you needed to save. You needed to save yourself. Not in a dramatic movie scene, not through revenge, not through proving anything. Through thousands of quiet decisions to return to yourself. And maybe that is the real opposite of narcissistic abuse. They taught you to revolve around them. Healing teaches you to come home to yourself. They taught you to question your perception. Healing teaches you to examine reality calmly. They taught you that boundaries were rejection. Healing teaches you that boundaries are protection. They taught you that love meant sacrifice. Healing teaches you that healthy love includes reciprocity. They taught you to chase. Healing teaches you to choose. They taught you to react. Healing teaches you to respond. They taught you to shrink. Healing teaches you to expand. And eventually, you will understand something that may feel impossible today. You were never too much. You were often trying to get your basic emotional needs met in a place that could not meet them consistently. You were not necessarily too sensitive. You may have been responding to an environment that repeatedly made you feel unsafe. You were not weak because you stayed too long. You may have been hopeful. You may have been loyal. You may have been trying to make sense of something that was intentionally or unintentionally confusing. Do not use your past vulnerability as evidence against yourself. Use it as information. Learn, grow, strengthen your boundaries, become more discerning, and then forgive yourself for not knowing what you know now. You cannot go back and protect the version of yourself who entered that relationship with today's knowledge. But you can protect the person standing here today, and that is enough. So if you are listening to this with tears in your eyes, if you have spent years questioning yourself, if you have been made to feel selfish for wanting peace, if you have been manipulated into believing that your boundaries were cruelty, if you have been slowly disconnected from the person you used to be, I want you to hear this clearly. You are still here. That matters. The part of you that wanted freedom is still here. The part of you that knew something was wrong is still here. The part of you that wanted to laugh again is still here. The part of you that wanted to be respected is still here. The part of you that dreamed before the relationship became so consuming is still here. You do not have to destroy yourself to prove that you survived. You get to rebuild. You get to become peaceful. You get to become confident. You get to become discerning. You get to become whole. And the day may come when you realize that the greatest thing you recovered was not the relationship, not the apology, not the explanation, and not the validation. It was yourself. That is what no manipulator gets to take from you forever. Your life belongs to you. Your future belongs to you. Your voice belongs to you. Your boundaries belong to you. Your choices belong to you. And your healing belongs to you. So walk forward, not bitter, not obsessed, not waiting for revenge. Walk forward with clarity. Walk forward with boundaries. Walk forward with self-respect. Walk forward knowing that you do not have to convince everyone of your worth. The people who are safe for you will not require you to constantly prove it. And the people who benefit from your self-doubt may not celebrate your healing. That is okay. You are not healing to make them comfortable. You are healing because your life is worth protecting. You are healing because peace matters. You are healing because your future deserves a version of you who is present for it. And perhaps one day, when you finally look back at the person who once made you question your entire existence, you will not ask, "Why didn't they love me?" You will ask a much more powerful question. Why did I ever believe that I had to abandon myself to be loved? And then you will know. You never did. You never had to. You were worthy before they arrived. You were worthy while you were struggling. You are worthy now. And you will be worthy in every chapter that comes next. So breathe. Let your shoulders drop. Let the silence become peaceful instead of frightening. Let your life become yours again. You survived the confusion. Now choose clarity. You survived the manipulation. Now choose boundaries. You survived the emotional chaos. Now choose peace. You survived losing yourself. Now choose yourself. And this time, do not choose yourself for one day. Choose yourself consistently, quietly, firmly, compassionately. Choose yourself when they approve. Choose yourself when they disapprove. Choose yourself when you feel strong. Choose yourself when you feel lonely. Choose yourself when you miss them. Choose yourself when guilt appears. Choose yourself when the old voice tells you that you are selfish. Choose yourself until choosing yourself no longer feels like rebellion. Until it feels normal. Until peace feels normal. Until respect feels normal. Until healthy love feels normal. Until you no longer confuse anxiety with chemistry. Until you no longer confuse chasing with devotion. Until you no longer confuse suffering with love. Until you understand that the most powerful life you can build is not one where the person who hurt you finally loses. It is one where they no longer determine whether you win. That is freedom, and you are allowed to have it.